So, a couple of days ago, Mr. Andrew Burnham set out a plan of how he's going to save the UK and everything is going to change and how it's going to be so much better. Well, just to have a look at all of that. But before going into the details of it, and I'm not going to go next level into all the details because that would take forever. But at the end of the day, what we're dealing with now, nothing against Andy Burnham, but what we're now dealing with is the next Prime Minister who nobody has voted in to be Prime Minister in any way, shape, or form. And he's got the job kind of by default. Starmer said, "No way, I'm going to stand up. I'm going to make them fight for it if anyone's going to take it from me." And to be fair, I admired that. I don't think Starmer was amazing. He did a lot of things wrong. But he had the backbone and stupidly thought he might do that and took him for his word and had a bit of respect for that and thought, well, maybe if he's given chance and he has a couple more years at it, it might come round. He might make some things work because obviously it's not going very well right now. But he bottled it because he's a word I won't say on here. And now Andy Burnham's basically walking in because nobody can stand up to it. And nobody's voted him in. Nobody in the UK, when they voted Labour in, were voting for him to be in charge. Now, there's a lot of people that like him, and I'm not saying that that's wrong, but there's reasons it might not go so well. It might, and I hope it does, obviously. But that's where we stand right now. So basically, in the space of 12 years or so, we've had 6 prime ministers. Let's call it 7 at this stage, because it's near enough 7 at this stage. It's pretty much done. And, I mean, Italy are fairly close to that, but we're worse than Italy in terms of... I think we are genuinely possibly the worst on the planet for an unstable government, because that's just too many to have in such a short space of time, relatively. Like, other countries have had 3 leaders in the space of 12 years. We're now going to have 7. Really bad political countries, I mean, in terms of stability, have not had 7. What are we doing? Yes, if they're bad, get them out, fair enough. But this is just, it's getting to be a joke now, because in 6 months or a year and a half, if this doesn't go the way that people assume it might and hope it might, and I hope so too, then what? He gets kicked out next. We're on to 8. I'm not sure on the timing if we'd get 8 in 12 years, but possibly. It wouldn't surprise me. Stranger things have happened. Certain people didn't stay in very long. So, overall, a lot of instability. I think the Lib Dems and the Conservatives might make out they're not pushing for a general election for the good of the country, to let the Prime Minister get in and have a good go and to settle in and for the good of the country and working together. I think in real terms, if the Lib Dems or Conservatives thought they had even half a chance in a general election, they would be pushing for a new election. And they would just literally argue what I said at the start, is nobody voted for him not to be Prime Minister of the UK. But they're not doing that because they know they'll probably lose a lot more seats. Because when little elections have happened, it's not gone well lately. Not really. So I think because they know they're weak, they don't want to do that. But getting more to the speech itself and what he's trying to lay out. So, first of all, obviously have to take everything with a huge pinch of salt. Because at the end of the day, he is a politician. He might not be the Prime Minister yet, but he is a politician. So, you can't trust what he says is going to happen. He might have got some stuff right with Manchester. Some things might have went well, but a bit different when it comes to a country. So we'll see. But take everything with a grain of salt, because he's a politician. And is he charismatic? I think he is. Which, it's kind of annoying, but it's kind of concerning at the same time. He's weirdly charismatic. I don't think he's as, to keep using that word, charismatic as he thinks he is. He's definitely not as funny as he thinks he is. But charismatic leaders have got in charge of countries in the past, and it doesn't necessarily end very well. Not naming any names, and I'm not saying that will happen, and let's hope not. But being charismatic does not make a good leader. Don't get me wrong, I'd rather they can string, a sentence together. I'd rather they had some kind of personality and weren't as boring as a lettuce. But at the same time, that doesn't make a good leader necessarily, not if it's partly put on as well. It's not as natural as it could be. But to the speech, talking a lot about collabing politics, which I do think that is needed. I think just blaming each other and all the infighting, it's part of the game. And some of it's all right, some of it I quite enjoy, but there is too much at some time. It gets beyond a point, and there is too much sometimes where that's all you're doing, and you can complain about problems as we all do, but at the end of the day you need to provide solutions, and I think that's hopefully the difference, and hopefully these ideas he has will do that, and instead of just fighting, they'll work together and make some stuff work. But I think people, not just politicians, but I think people as a whole need to be judged on their actions, not their words. Obviously, if their words are bad, then judge them on that too, but don't judge people on what they're saying they're going to do. Just wait till they actually do it and then kind of act accordingly. He's trying to say about giving a lot more power to local government and local level. I think there's pros and cons to that. I think in some ways it could work really well, and things could get done a lot quicker and a lot more effective and a lot more cost effective, which I think is what he's getting at. The counter side to that is it leaves room for a lot of misspending and a lot of corruption, essentially. And I have seen firsthand, without naming any particular council or area, where these millions they get given to spend on rejuvenation, for example, get spent on things that nobody would ever say needed done. Certain companies get the job, and I'm not saying there's any backhanders happening. That would be crazy. That never happens. Corruption isn't a thing in the UK government in any way. But I think if you polled the people and asked them, there would be a lot more sensible, practical ways they could spend that money, rather than, for example, repaving a city centre that didn't need repaved. For example, just off the top of my head. And then, rather than using that money to give council tax rates or business rate breaks to companies and to small business owners and things like that, to get empty shops filled again. There's loads of things, but that's a side rant. So it could work. Local power, it could go really badly wrong. And then he won't have to answer to it because he's not responsible then. It's local business, it's local government work. So got to be careful with that. He did say about problem solving, which I do believe in 100%. Like I said before, I've said it a few times. Don't go on about problems forever if you don't have a solution. So hopefully he will be good at problem solving and put it into action. Number 10 up north, I think that's a bit of a gimmick. It kind of, you can, I think, I know what he's getting at. I know what he's trying to do, but it's a bit of a gimmick. I think it doesn't really help. I think MPs should be in their areas. I think they should listen to the people, things like that. But I think if the power is in Westminster and things like that, then it is what it is. And anything in this country, well, not a massive country, can be, not dictated, that's the wrong word, but can be sorted from down there if anyone's got some sense in the head. But gimmicks are high. Mentioned utilities, more control over water, housing, energy, transport, things like that. Tech, defence. I think all that does need some kind of devolution, does need some kind of different way of funding, because I think I could go on a rant for 20 minutes about water. I really could, and about how it's a regional monopoly, your water supplier. And it genuinely is, because depending on what area you're in, you have no choice who supplies you with your fresh and wastewater services. So I don't think that will change that specifically, but I do think more leeway in that is probably good. So, decent idea. Defence investment, it shouldn't have been lowered. When Labour got in and put the cost down, that was stupid. You need a strong defence. Even if you don't use it, you're better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. There doesn't have to be something directly going on to need it. And just because you have it, you shouldn't be getting into wars that are just wars of choice and where people are going to die for the government and not for the betterment of the country, not for the defence of the country, but for shady goings on and all kinds of weird stuff. So you have to toe the line, but I think defence is very important. So fair enough. Being resilient is just common sense. Like I say, being more self-reliant, common sense. It shouldn't have to be a speaking point, but that's the point we've got to now, where common sense ideas sound just amazing, sound insane, because we've gone so far from common sense. If you just don't have to be a yes man, and you are meant to be in charge, even though you are meant to be elected officials, again, not elected by us, but you should listen to what the people want. And if it makes sense and it's sensible enough, don't get me wrong, there is some things wouldn't work, but if 70, 80, 90% of people want something, try your best to sort it out. As long as it isn't massively detrimental to the country, just get it done. That's what these MPs are meant to be doing, and that's what they're not doing and haven't done for a long time. They're just self-serving, and they leave office, and within a space of years, they're worth millions of pounds. Weird that, isn't it? Because they don't get paid millions, funnily enough, to be Prime Minister. I'm not saying it's no money, but it's not a lot for what the job is really in this day and age. And then some weird way, they're worth so much money. So again, there's no such thing as corruption or backhanders or little dodgy dealings. We talked about apprenticeships. Brilliant idea. I think it's a lot more, again, it's one of those that seems like, oh wow, what a good idea, Andrew. But in reality, it's not the hardest thing to just set up more apprenticeships rather, and make it happen. So hopefully that'll be an easy win. And it is better. A lot of people, apprenticeships are better than university. A lot of people have university degrees, a lot of debt, and never use them degrees. I'm sure everybody listening knows somebody that has that. So apprenticeships, brilliant idea. Fully agree. Public housing, he's trying to... Yeah, there's 100% a housing issue. There's a lot of houses getting turned into HMOs, multiple occupancy housing, to try and help. There's a lot of things going on, but the one thing... So we need more housing, agreed. I think the one thing where I kind of pause a little bit is he says, social housing, council housing. right. And there's a lot of benefits to renting, don't get me wrong. And if you're in a council house, it's a lot more secure, arguably, than if you're in a private rent. But if you're that bothered about the housing issue, which there is one, why don't you, one, make it easier for private landlords instead of, because he didn't say anything about that as far as I'm aware, because it got made a lot harder for private landlords, and some of them are actually really good. So encourage private landlords and people to become private landlords, and you'll have, some of the housing issues sorted. And also, why don't you build cheaper homes to buy? So like starter homes and intermediate homes. They might not be in there forever. They might not be in there for 10 years, but get you on the property ladder. You can sell it on later down the line, and slightly bigger house, whatever. Why not do that? Because some people don't want to rent. Some people will want to buy a house. That's not been addressed at all. Instead, they only want to push social housing only. And I'm not saying we don't need any of that, we do. But it gets a little bit towards the very socialist thing. And I won't say communist necessarily, but more socialist. And that's, again, you can have too much socialism without going into history and naming names again. Look at how that works out. I think you need a bit. I think we should have public fire, obviously, and firefighters should get paid more, and there shouldn't be a lot of volunteer firefighters. They should all be getting paid. I think that should be addressed. I think we should have, obviously, public police. Obviously, the NHS is amazing. They're all levels of socialism. But when it gets to a point, you've got to kind of toe the line, and I think this government over the last few years has been edging more and more and more towards social control, and I think it needs to go more libertarian, more common sense. So I'm hoping some sense prevails with that as well. And yes, build all the council houses, gets a lot of people jobs building and roofing and plastering and everything else as well. Brilliant idea. But also encourage private letting and cheap new buyer homes, small starter homes. Didn't mention a lot else really that I could key into. Mentioned lowering business rates, perhaps helping small businesses, things like that. I think that's a brilliant idea. I think it might bring some towns back a little bit, but it's got to last as well, and it's got to count. And it can't be specifically just for certain types. I think it's got to be more broadly and encourage a lot of small businesses. Labour aren't necessarily, for business people, but I think that is a good idea. And if you want to grow Britain and have people stay here and run businesses here instead of going abroad or selling abroad, then that's probably the way you've got to do it. You've got to encourage businesses as well as, just workers, if you like. And that's kind of it, really. I think, like I say, it wasn't the worst speech. It was funny and tiny bit funny in parts, but not as funny as he thinks. He is charismatic, which can be disturbing. But nobody's voted for him. And is he going to be the saviour? Or is he going to be just like everyone else? Is he going to make promises he won't keep and just have an excuse after an excuse? Only time will tell. And I think it's a tricky job. We'll just have to see. We'll just have to see what he manages and see how long he sticks to what he's saying. But he might be what everyone wants him to be. But it won't take a lot to improve on what we've had. And I think we don't want to get to 8 prime ministers in the space of 12 or 13 years. I think that would just prove the point. We're the most unstable politically on the planet. So some stability, whether that would be an election, and then whoever's in, give them 3, 4, 5 years to prove a point. Who knows? But what's your views? Andrew, is he the saviour? The saviour from the north?